Our keynote speaker this evening is Michael Desiderio. Michael has been a member for over 20 years and credits Toastmasters with helping him evolve as a speaker, leader, and person. He is an advanced communicator, silver, and competent leader. He is currently a member of Dobson Ranch Toastmasters and Epicurean Toastmasters. And he's proud to be a charter member of Epicurean. Michael enjoys the competitive side of Toastmasters, and depending on how you define contest success, he would say he has experienced some modest success in this area. Here are his stats, and you can be the judge. He competed once at the district level table topics contest, placing third. He competed twice at the district level evaluation contest, placing first both times. He's competed 13 times at the district level international speech contest, placing first 8 times. But Michael doesn't want to discuss those other showings. Michael has been happily married to his wife, Stephanie, for nearly 32 years. She's had to put up with him a lot longer than we have. They have an amazing 12-year-old son, Michael J., who is handling timer duties this evening. In his day job, Michael is an executive for an association of business schools representing nearly 200 business schools in over 30 countries. In this role, he has had the privilege of speaking in cities around the world, from Shanghai to Los Angeles to London and countless locations in between. Michael has found that, like communication, leadership is universal in many ways. Please help me welcome Michael as he delivers his talk, Grab Your Next Jacket.
Thanks. It's a little bright in here. You know, I was talking to, what's it called? Immediate past. What? Hey, David. Hey, listen, I'm talking, man. What is it? What's this title you have? Oh yeah, director. You know, so he was giving me some advice out in the hallway. He said, Michael, I really don't think it's a good idea to chew gum when you're going to talk. I said, listen, David, I don't take advice. I give advice. And when I give advice, people usually take it. Remember that? All right. So there's a couple other things about David that I think we have to talk about. I don't know how you know him beyond Toastmasters. But I know him. You might have been right about the gum, by the way. I know him out there on the street. See, I grew up in Brooklyn. We've known each other since we were 3 years old. He's 44, I'm 58. And out there, he isn't known as district director. Ooh, I'm impressed. Director, like you direct traffic? Is that what you do? Yeah. Out there, and I apologize, Mrs. Hopper, I hope I don't besmirch anything about your betrothed, but my job is to come here and tell it like it is. So David Hopper out there is known as D-Hop. Yeah, it's true. He's D-Hop out there. You might be asking, how do you get that nickname? It's an interesting story, and again, I apologize. Any other relatives in the room? Hopper? No? Okay. So D-Hop got his name because he's always going around dropping a bunch of crap. Ooh, am I allowed to say crap here? Am I allowed to say that? Who do I check with? Anybody? I'm good. All right. And then he hops over it and leaves it for everybody else to clean it up. That's what he does. One time, we happened to share the same bookie. We graduated high school together at 18. I don't know if I mentioned I'm 58 and he's 44. Hard to get that line out. And we share the same bookie. And so we placed this bet. I'm from Brooklyn. Did I mention that? Horse betting, when I was growing up, used to have something called the OTB, off-track betting. And me and D-Hop, we'd be in there all the time. And he would give me these tips. They used to call me Des. He'd be, Des, this is the one. I take it as advice, 3 years old, we grew up together. Every single time, lose. But I find out later that he was betting on other horses. Right? And he was telling the bookie to stack the odds against me. Dropping the crap, hopping over it, and moving on. That's D-Hop right there. I'm sure he doesn't do that in Toastmasters. And I apologize if I'm being disrespectful. Hopper. What a name. How'd you get that name? But I would be remiss if I didn't mention one other thing about our distinguished, immediate, past director. That would require me to show him the level of respect that he deserves, that anyone in your position deserves. Because, quite honestly, it's a position I would not want or take, because I know the amount of work I've heard that it does take for someone to lead the district. And so we owe you, along with many of the other folks that have served, that were honored here tonight, a debt of gratitude. And I mean that in all sincerity. Because so many people are willing to take the easy path. And as far as I can tell, David, it's not an easy path to lead the way you have led. So we just wanted to have a little fun to start. At least I did. Maybe there'll be some more fun later as I understand it. But tonight I'm going to leave you with hopefully a little bit more than the fact that you're D-Hop. Now, people, I'm going to post that on Facebook. We'll get it out there. But again, thank you. So let's give David a round of applause. So leadership isn't linear, and neither is this speech going to be linear. So for those of you that were looking for a perfect roadmap, if I'm in a contest, I have a roadmap that is clear. Tonight, you're going to have to keep up with me because I want your brain to be stretched. And part of the way I'm going to do that is taking you on a journey with me, and I'll wrap in some principles along the way, and then at the end, I'm going to try to tie it together in a way that you walk out of here maybe saying, this reinforces what I understand about leadership. Maybe it will frame things in a way that you haven't heard, and maybe you won't agree with me. Ooh. I'm not afraid of that, and I hope that you're not. While it won't be a true dialogue because I'm here and you're there, my style is not that I'm on some mountain and everything I say you should take and run out and this is gospel. No, not at all. But I have had some experience as a leader, and there's some fundamental things that I've learned literally as I've traveled around the globe and had the opportunity to speak and do business in many places. I've realized there are certain things that are fundamental. So let's start with that journey back to Brooklyn, New York. So in the early 80s, there was a piece of attire that was the mainstay, at least in Brooklyn and the East Coast of the U.S., of the American male at that time. And that piece of attire was called the members only jacket. Who remembers the member? Nobody's old. Anybody? Oh, yeah, there's a few people my age in here. So the members only jacket was introduced in 1975 in Europe. Took about 5 years to make it to the U.S. distribution channel. But I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. And there's always an alternative distribution channel if you know how to tap into it. Thankfully, my family did. So in 1979, at the age of 15, I got my first members-only jacket. Now, this wasn't my first. This was my last. This is an actual jacket that I had as a teenager quite some time ago. It's weathered. It's worn. But this jacket in my neighborhood said, you were on the edge. You were in. And it almost fits. It almost fits. And I'm 58. Later, you'll ask me, because everybody always does, why the hell did you keep that jacket all these years? Maybe it was for this moment. Who knows? So this jacket was a part of who Michael Desiderio was at that time. And I wore it with pride. Out on the street with my friends, had it in like 5 different colors. The only one that I know of that I still have. Maybe my wife's hid the rest in the attic. But this jacket defined an element of who I was. And see, leadership isn't one slice of who we are at any one point in time. And I'll come back to that later. Remember, not linear. So at some point, I want to say in 1981, I got tired of these jackets. And so I took the members only jacket and I hung it up. Literally, because you can see I still have it. And I turned it in for leather. Now, this was the last leather blazer that I bought when I was 19. Notice I said blazer, not jacket, okay? So, this also almost still fits. This leather blazer in my neighborhood said, you are street savvy. You have an edge of scariness and coolness. Now, to some, it also said you were a thug. I wasn't that person. I'm not the person you would take to a street fight. Definitely not. Wasn't me. Maybe you'd take Peter, but not me. I'm not that guy. But because I had this street savvy, and most of my life I've been able to talk my way into and out of most situations. So I had the gift of gab, and I wrapped it in this street savvy because my mom and dad, growing up in Brooklyn, blue-collar folks, felt like you needed to have street smarts, even if you weren't the guy going to the fight. And this then allowed me to wrap all of that charm in leather. And here's what I learned as I peeled back that other facet of who Michael Desiderio was. I realized that if you take street savvy, wrap it in leather, have a little bit of prose that you can charm people with, you can actually get along with the opposite sex even when you're sort of average looking like me. I mean, it really happens. And I remember at that time thinking to myself, this is yet another element that I'm going to keep with me forever. But like leadership, it was just a slice of who I was. I had peeled back this other layer of Michael Desiderio. See, people will tell us once we have the members-only jacket, that's where you should stay. People will want to stamp you with some kind of label and say, no, you can't wear this because this is who you are. You're this. You're not this. And while you want to be respectful to those folks, the truth is none of us are one slice. We're this element, an aggregate of everything that happens. So at some point, I said, leather was fun. Still a very nice jacket to wear on occasion. But in 1984, Miami Vice, the original series, hit the airwaves. And Don Johnson made the linen jacket famous. Now, I'm not putting this one on because you can see it's pretty raggedy, but he made this jacket famous. And suddenly I'm like, that's who I am. And I went out and got this linen jacket, and at night, I went out to nightclubs, and I wore this. It was 1984. You could do the math on how old I was. And it just showed that there I was, not the members only, not the leather, but now I was linen. It was another slice of who I was, but I never let go of those other elements. And too often in life, we think that as leaders, something from our past shouldn't be there anymore. We've got to hide it. We've got to bury it. I say embrace it, because the facets of who you are not strips. It's, again, everything lined up side by side that builds the picture. Now, Don Johnson admittedly looked a lot better in this jacket than I did. And at one point, I finally said, well, it's time to hang up that linen jacket. And in 1989, I got an electrical engineering degree. We share that in common, I believe. And I moved to Arizona to take a very conventional job as an engineer at Motorola back in its heyday. And so during the day, I was in relatively conservative suits, white shirts, red ties, and something that you don't know is before I would go to work, I would pop out the diamond stud earring that was in my ear. And I shaved off all this facial hair that I had. I had a mustache. Now I just have sort of a goatee. And I had a tight beard. I shaved it all off because people told me, in this culture, lose the earring, lose the beard, you'll be perceived much better. So I did. I buried that piece of who I was for money. And that's just the truth. I wanted to rise in the corporate world, and I did. And in 1990, a year after I was here, I met my lovely wife, Stephanie, now almost 32 years. And the next year, 1991, we're back in New York visiting my family. And I don't know if you remember a restaurant, it's here, which may still be out there, Planet Hollywood. So I was in love with Planet Hollywood because three of my favorite actors at that time, Bruce Willis, Sylvester Stallone, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, were early investors in Planet Hollywood. So we went there, and I bought this denim jacket. And it was great because at night, I could go home after Motorola, hang up the suit, and put on the denim. Now, honestly, with my skin tone, it's just not the best look for me. It seemed okay in the 90s. But putting it on when I was thinking about this presentation, I said, really, I don't know if I'm even going to put it on. But I wanted to, because this is probably the only jacket up here that might be a collector's item. Might be worth some money. So if anybody wants to buy it, see me afterwards. So during the night, I'd have my denim, and during the day, I was in conservative corporate America at that time. Well, it gets better, right? Because I start to realize that it's hard to suppress those elements of who we are. It starts to create anxiety, right? So during the day, I'm very conservative. People had me pegged as a very conventional engineer because I figured that was my path forward. And I didn't want anybody to know that I'm wearing denim at night or popping the earring back in. And I know that's not a big deal anymore, but it was in my era. And I started to feel like something wasn't congruent. Because some of the facets of who I was and am, I had buried. Now, I'm not saying that all of us, there's some other things that I do in private that you don't want to know about, right? Some of us don't do everything. You don't want to do everything in public. But we have to stay true to who we are. And that's true as we pursue leadership. Coming back to all these facets. Now, you may say, Michael, in the real world, you can't let everything out there. I agree. I completely agree. Unfortunately, sadly, that's the conflicts that we deal with now. What I'm suggesting, though, is you have to find a way to take those elements that are slices of who you are and integrate them into your style, your leadership style, in a way that serves those that you lead. And now, let me be clear. For me, leadership isn't about just positional leadership. My son's 12 years old. He's a leader in some ways. There are people in this room that are retired. You're still leaders in some ways. There are folks that are just maybe entering the workforce. You're a leader in some ways. And then there are folks like David who are in positional leadership. But there's no reason to think that the slices of who we are should not comprise all of who we are. And let me go further. In 2000, things started to change at Motorola. It's one of my favorite jackets. One of my favorite jackets. And in 2002, I left that great company, which was great to me, by the way. No qualms. They paid for my MBA. They treated me well, 13 years of health insurance. I mean, it was wonderful. But when I left, because my options were move to Schaumburg, Chicago, outside of Chicago, or take a package and leave. And I took a package in January of 2002. And I don't know if you remember the economy at that time. It was less than optimal. And I hung out a consulting shingle, and I started consulting and speaking full time. And now I could let Michael Desiderio be completely unleashed. Because when I took a stage, I could wrap it in anything I wanted to. And I have been wrapped in many things on many stages around the world. And I realized I never let go of any of that, though. Every piece of my life that is represented here is still part of who I am. And unfortunately, sometimes I'll go back to places where people remember me as the conservative engineer. Or I may go back to Brooklyn and guys that I grew up with go, hey, Des, you remember? No, well, yeah, I remember it, but I don't need to do that anymore. But it's still a piece of the character that built me up, and it has shaped my leadership style in a way that I could never have guessed. My mom, God rest her soul, she once told me before I left for Arizona, she said, Michael, every piece of who you are is something to hold on to. I'm not saying you have to put it all on display for everybody on every moment of every day, but it's in there. Find ways to tap it. It will serve you well. Be honest with you, in 1989, when I came here, I really didn't think she knew what she was talking about. God rest her soul. I really didn't. But it took me a few years to realize, in fact, it was wisdom that I wish I knew at a younger age. So if there's pieces of you that you think are gone, there are times when you want to bury something, let go of it forever. So I want to make sure that part's clear. Remember, not linear. Told you it wasn't going to be linear. Sometimes you like the boxes to all kind of line up and follow a path. Well, I've found with adults after dinner, sometimes it's good to cause confusion in the brain because you might have had a glass of alcohol. And maybe somebody might have. And I want you to be able to think about the full picture, not in just snapshots. So if you miss some of it, it's okay. So let me reframe this idea of leadership. How many of you, before I do that, would say that you're a leader? For those of you that didn't raise your hand, why? Why didn't you raise your hand? Anybody willing to say? There is some truth in that. Leadership is a lot of work. So if you didn't raise your hand and you're uncomfortable expressing why, I'm not going to force that. Here's what I've heard from other audiences. Sometimes people think that to be a leader, you need somebody that's following you. Some people will tell me, Michael, I'm not a leader because I don't have enough experience doing anything. And my answer there is, were you born? Are you here? I get it. At a 5-year-old, maybe you're not going to think of them as a traditional leader. Bless you. But everywhere along the continuum of our lives, elements of this leadership piece are there. Your kids, when they play with their friends, if you're privileged to have kids, when they're 5 or 6, Somebody's taking a leadership role. Somebody's taking an obnoxious role too. We understand that. But somebody's doing that. All of us have elements of leadership that are part of who we are. And what I'm asking you to do is to dig deep and find them. And I'm going to move this bat so one of us doesn't trip over it. To dig deep and look for them. Because all of us really need to be thinking about how can we have an impact. What do I mean by impact? Influence is at the core of leadership for me. I had the privilege of doing a podcast. Don Griffith came to my office and we talked, I don't remember, for 40 minutes or so. And the first question he asked me is, what do you think leadership is? And for me, leadership is about influence. It's not about commanding. It's not about accountability. It's all those things, but it's ultimately about influence. But how do you get to influence? See, people want to start at the leadership first and say, hey, I'm a leader. Here I am. Some of you say I'm not a leader, but some of you want to say I'm a leader positionally or because I'm smarter than other people, I have the degrees, whatever it might be. Influence, right? That's the goal. That's the goal of leadership. But how do you get influence? Through connection. You can't influence anybody. Oh, you can force somebody if you put a gun to their head to do something. That's not the kind of influence I'm talking about. If you're in a position, you're a CEO, certainly you can put out a mandate and say, hey, tomorrow this product is gone. You can do that, and sometimes that's important. But what I'm talking about is influence at its core is moving people to think differently, act differently, or at least, as a minimum, consider the fact that there might be a different viewpoint than theirs. Doesn't mean they have to agree, but they'll at least say, there's a different path. That takes influence. Influence takes connection. How do you get to connection? Connection comes from being authentically who you are. And to be authentically who you are, you got to embrace every jacket you own. You just have to decide when to pull which jacket out. Too often we think we got to put everything out there all at once. That's not, unfortunately, going to get you the influence because I cannot connect with everybody by wearing this jacket, literally and figuratively. So sometimes I realize that I shouldn't wear my underwear to a wedding. We're going to a wedding next week. That's why it popped into my head. I guess you should wear underwear. Just keep them under the pants, right? Probably it should be. Yeah, probably a good idea. There are periods, though, where we have to understand, we've got to pull out what is right to connect with this group. What is the best element of who I am to bring to the surface at this point in time and hold off a little bit on this one. Knowing they're all there. The full package of who we are is always there. And there are people in all of our lives, like I said, they're going to go, hey, whoa, that's not you. Yeah, it actually is me. It is me. It's maybe not me for you at this moment, but it is me. And so connection has to come first if you want to create influence. And there's so many different ways to connect with people. Now, somebody later is going to grab me and say, so you're talking about manipulation when you say influence? You can label it that way if you really want. But to me, I don't understand how you can get anything done in a relationship, in a marriage, in a partnership, or in business if you don't connect with people and have some level of influence. But here's the thing. It's both ways. Meaning you have to be willing to be influenced by others. See, some of us want to stand on a stage or stand in an office, and we want to be the only ones having influence, having leadership. It doesn't work. Again, positional leadership, it does work for a period of time. If Tim Cook says, hey, the iPod is done, gone, get rid of it, it's going to be gone. It's going to be done. Understand that. When a surgeon's operating and she says to the assistant in the operating room, give me a scalpel, that isn't the time to have a debate and say, can we discuss this? Do you really need the scalpel right now? I get it. There's times when leadership means taking action regardless of what others might think in that moment. So I don't want anybody leaving here going, Desiderio said it's all just kind of footloose and fancy free. No. There are moments when leaders have to act and ultimately be accountable for those actions. So that's the other piece of leadership that I think some leaders, not this group, some leaders forget. They want the glory of leadership without the accountability. Let me give you an example that happened this week. My son's in the room, but he was with me when it happened, so I think it's okay. Who has ever left their phone someplace and forgot their phone? Anybody? Yeah, see, Michael J., you weren't alone. So he comes running in the door first week at middle school, first time riding the bus. He comes running. He's like, Dad, I left my phone on the bus. I'm like, well, now in the modern times, the bus, there's an app. We can follow the school bus. So we jump in my car. I said, Michael J., we're finding the bus. And so he's looking on the app. He's like, Dad, it looks like they're going to the high school. That's the depot. And so as we're getting to the high school, in my brain, I'm going to have two options. I can follow the buses into a place you're not supposed to go. You're not supposed to go there. Michael J., you're not supposed to go there. And raise the opportunity to get his phone back. Or I could stop, pull around the other way, and at 4:30 in the afternoon, hope that somebody is in the building that's going to let me in, that's going to talk to me. I'm not going to lie to you. I drove through. Didn't even think about it, really. Went in. Now we're in the bus depot. And there's a bus driver. She's pumping gas, and she sees us, and she's like, her eyes bulge out of her head because there's no other cars in the bus depot. And so I go, Michael J., just go tell her you lost your phone. So he jumps out, and she decides to bring him back. And she said, Sir, you're not supposed to be in here. I said, no, I realized that, but he lost his phone. She goes, yeah, but you're not supposed to be in here. You need to drive around and go to the building and see if anybody's there, and you can place a report. And I said, okay, I apologize. Michael J. jumps back in. I said, Michael J., keep your eyes open for bus 98. And so we drive around, and sure enough, there's bus 98. So I pull over and stop. He runs out. Bus driver's still in there. He goes up, and he's talking with the bus driver. Now another gentleman comes over to me. Sir, you're not supposed to be in here. I said, I know, my phone. Son lost his phone. He said, it doesn't matter. You need to call transportation. I said, can you give me their number? He goes, I don't know their number. I'm like, you work for transportation. I apologized profusely. Michael J. got his phone back. Another gentleman came over because you can't get out of the depot without somebody with a code. And so I had to explain to him what we were doing there, and so we get out. What's the story on leadership? In one aspect, I'm just wired to act. I'm like, okay, I got to solve this problem. In retrospect, yeah, he got his phone back. Was it really the best way to do it? Some of you are going to say, absolutely. See, they're going to say, absolutely. Probably not the best example for Michael J. to see that it's all about solving the problem any way you have to. So in retrospect, none of us are perfect, but you knew that tonight when you saw me step on stage. I just wanted to go and get it done. And how often as leaders is that what we want to do? Doesn't matter who we run over. Doesn't matter who we have to push out of the way. And hey, if you don't want to come with me, that's okay. I'm going anyway. I'm driving through the gate. And sometimes, again, when that surgeon needs that scalpel, that is the right thing to do. But in reality, to get a phone back, probably not the right thing to do. How many of you have done the same thing, but not about a phone? And then you forget, what example did I just model? Who have I affected in ways that I really didn't consider? When I went into the depot, I'm grinning. I just can't help it because I still can't believe we just kind of did it and got the phone back. But they said it's not safe to be in here because the bus drivers aren't expecting a car to be parked behind buses that they're still in. And they're right. They're right. So part of being a great leader is to be accountable for the times where maybe we didn't act in the best way possible. You can't just get the job done and not be willing to be accountable for those unintended consequences that may be out there. And again, not here, because Toastmasters teaches leadership. You live it. You are it. It's ingrained in you. But I do think all of us can always be reminded. I've been a Toastmaster for so many years. You heard it, 20 plus years. And you heard what I just did at the depot, right? So none of us are perfect, but we need to be willing to embrace that. Sometimes I see leaders who will leave the organization that they were just with, and you hear all the stuff that they will air. Now, I'm not talking about something that's illegal or unethical. I'm just talking about you worked there, you made these decisions for, say, 15 years, but now you're not accountable for anything that's happening, and you're out there saying what's wrong. You can do that. But I think sometimes we need to look ourselves in the face and say, maybe I bear some of the responsibility of what's going on. And you may not be in a position to change it, but I'm just saying we shouldn't be out there saying, hey, we were perfect the 15 years we were there, and the people that came after me, they just suck. Am I allowed to say suck? Yes, she said I can. So when you think about what makes a great leader, I asked some folks today, 6 people in the room, not just about leadership. I asked them to give me a word for a variety of things. Again, not linear. The easy thing for me to do would have been go to 6 people, ask them, give me one word for leadership. It's the easy thing to do. We don't want it easy. We want to stretch our brains. So I asked, and this is great. I won't tell you who it is if he wants to. So I asked somebody, give me one word that describes today. And he said, sunny. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting something else. As leaders, how many times have you gone into a meeting or into a project and you hear something that has you baffled? And now you have to figure out, what do you do with it? Because that's what they gave you. They didn't give you what you wanted or what you expected. They gave you sunny. And I was looking for today. It's glorious. It's optimistic. Sunny. Now, Sunny is optimistic, but he literally was talking about, because he was looking out the window. He said, hey, look, it's sunny, right? So as a leader, remember, you're not always going to get the answer you want. I went to the next person, and I asked one word that describes Toastmasters. I think you're all going to agree with this one. Excellent. Excellent. As leaders, there's times when things are excellent. Things are amazing. Everything's clicking. You're getting promotions, or you're leading the team. You're going, how can it be any better? And then there's times when it's not so excellent. When you're a leader and the excellent times happen, embrace them, but not just for you. For the people that are working with you, whether they report to you, whether they're Toastmaster volunteers on a committee, acknowledge the excellence that they've done, because that's what real leaders do. Real leaders will take accountability in public. They'll have the private conversations that say, hey, you really screwed up. Let's work this out. But that's not what they're saying in the public. In the public, they want to praise their team, give them all the credit, even if it was them. And the stuff that's the bad stuff, you deal with privately, and out there, you take and own it. Because excellence is something that should be celebrated, but not just for us as leaders, for our teams, for our volunteers, and everybody else. I asked, give me one word that describes follower. Patient. Patient. Now, this one hit home for me because I tend to like to go fast. And I have a team that works with me that reminds me that all the time. And they are so patient. And what I've learned is leaders, sometimes we can be very impatient because we want to get the phone back. We don't want to call transportation. We don't want to fill out the form. We just want to solve the problem. And again, if you need the scalpel, solve the problem. If you need the phone, maybe it's okay to be patient. Leaders are patient. Followers are patient. Not always. Then I asked a wonderful person one word to describe you, them. And she said, woman. If you look at Toastmasters, how many of the leaders in Toastmasters are women? Quite a few. And what I've found is that we want to label people. Now, she was describing herself. We could all describe ourselves with all kinds of different labels. But she was describing herself with quite a bit of pride. And I think whether you identify with this word or some other word that's non-binary, whatever it might be, don't let people tell you it's a bad thing. This is a wonderful thing. And whatever word is on here that you identify with, make it clear that it's part of your leadership style. Because whatever element makes you unique, she and I were much different. My style is going to be different. Mine's not going to be any better than hers. Embrace who and where you are and leverage it. Michael J. is going to give me some time here. I can see he's got his hand on the card. He's looking at me with his mask. So then I asked for a word. These two, I love them both. So let's go with, maybe that's the word we should go with first. I asked, give me a word to describe tomorrow. And they said, love. Holy cow, is this person amazing? We need this. We need this today. We need more of this. And as leaders, some leaders will think this is a dirty word. I don't think this person was referring to let's, kiss and go in the bedroom or anything. They were talking about love, like love the people you work with. Embrace who they are, not just embrace who you are. It's okay to be different and love them where they are, the people you're leading. And then, of course, I would have been remiss if I didn't ask to give me one word that describes leadership. Man, I didn't set this up with any of them. 6 different words that I asked for, synonyms. And they all fit elements of leadership. So I'm going to leave you with something that I hope you take with you. Access different aspects of your authentic self to connect with people where they are. It's the only quote I wrote down for tonight. And it's a quote that I have for me to remind me that this is what I need to do to be a better leader. Access different aspects of our authentic selves to connect with people where they are. When you connect, you can influence. And when you influence, you can then say you're a leader. It's been a privilege to be here with you tonight. I'll be around. I'd love to chat with you about leadership, but I'd love to chat with you about anything else that's on your mind. Because what I've learned is things are solved through dialogue, not through preaching. And so if I came across tonight with I had a lot of things I wanted to give you, it's because I wanted to even give you more. But this is what we had 45 minutes to do. It's been a privilege to be here. It's a privilege to be a Toastmaster. And David, I say once again, thank you for serving the district.